Good morning, metalheads of the internet, and welcome to a new episode of the Metal Meltdown. Today, we will be doing something very different. We will be having a very honest and frank discussion regarding racism within heavy metal, hardcore, and extreme music. And to help me with this, I have invited internet blogger and personality Jasmine Nicole onto the channel. We will be discussing the problems that people of color, minorities, and vulnerable people may face when exploring these worlds. We will be discussing the things that we've noticed or even experienced regarding racism and more general discrimination within these worlds. We will be discussing Black Lives Matter, and most importantly, we will be responding to your comments regarding whether or not you feel that heavy metal has an issue with racism, whether it be at the very core or whether it be simply with toxic, dangerous people. Please feel free to let us know in the comments how you feel about everything we're talking about and whether or not you think heavy metal has an issue with racism. And thank you for watching, thank you for supporting, and yeah. Round two. Welcome to the Metal Meltdown.
Thank you very much. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you very much for being here. This is something I've been wanting to do for a while, discuss racism within heavy metal, but unfortunately, as a straight white male from a middle-class family, I don't necessarily have the insight and experience, and I remember you reaching out to me before and thought that you'd make a great fit for something like this.
Thank you. Being, black, I think I have a lot of expertise on this.
Yeah,
I'm happy to share.
Yeah, definitely more than me, at least. No one's coming up to me going, "Fucking whitey."
Right. Exactly.
Who do they think they are, those whiteys? So I think
unfortunately, that's how it goes.
The way this will work, I'll ask you some questions. You can ask me some questions, and then we will respond to all of the comments that I sent you earlier. Does that sound good to you?
Yeah, sounds great.
Wonderful. My first question, and this is regarding how we first spoke months ago. I made a video about Lorna Shore calling out CJ McCreery for allegedly, depending on who you ask, saying and doing a whole bunch of stupid shit. And you had told me that you were excited and delighted to see somebody speaking out because your experiences with heavy metal had been not so positive. Can you tell me a little bit more about that, if that's all right?
Yeah, I've been a metal fan for a very, very long time, so I'm not new to this or to the scene or to the culture or anything like that. I've been listening to this stuff since I was like 10 or 11 years old because my parents brought me up on it. So I have seen the best that the metal community has to offer and all the camaraderie and all the good things about it, but I've also seen a lot of the shitty parts about it, like people like CJ, like people like Phil from Pantera and the whole shit with the white power symbol. Like, I've seen it all, and I've experienced, unfortunately, a lot of it myself. So it was really good to see someone who was specifically white and male who was willing to call all this stuff out. There are a lot of, I think if you know anything about like social justice and you have these kind of conversations, people's experiences are layered, and me being black and female, that intersection means that I'm going to deal with things and I'm going to have a perspective that maybe a lot of other people might not, unless you are also those things. So I say all that to say, when the CJ thing came up, I saw a lot of women talking about that situation, a lot of people calling women standing in solidarity with each other, calling them out, but I hardly saw any men doing it. So I was really excited that you, as someone who was white and male, was willing to go there when so many other men who were so willing to say that these women were liars, or who were just willing to jump to his defense simply because they're fans of him or fans of Lorna Shore. So yeah, and unfortunately that's typically how a lot of this stuff goes. Like, these people like an artist so much, or they just have a hard time picturing that someone they admire so much could do something so terrible. So whenever I do meet someone who's willing to talk about it, I'm always very excited to be a part of that conversation.
May I ask you any specific incidences you've had with metalheads' racism, discrimination? Any specific incidents?
Man, so many. The ones that stand out to me the most is that Yeah, I'm also a YouTuber, and my channel is, you just Google Rummoses for anyone who wants to follow me. But unfortunately, you'll go on my channel, and my love of metal is not reflected anywhere on it, except for like maybe a poster in the back, or a T-shirt that I'm wearing. And the reason for that is because I initially wanted to have a lot of content related to my love of metal, album reviews. I have so many videos that are unedited that I haven't posted yet, of me like unpacking my vinyl records that I've gotten from bands, talking about my favorite music. And the reason for that is because when I started uploading content, talking about the bands that I like or reviewing certain albums and stuff, I would just get all these comments calling me the N-word and calling me a bitch. And can I swear on this?
Oh, go for it. It's all good.
Okay. Yeah, they would just call me so many names, and I'm a pretty tough person. Being a Black female identifying person who grew up in a mostly predominantly Black area, you can imagine that sometimes liking metal or anything perceived as not Black enough can make you the target of a lot of criticism or ridicule. So I have a pretty thick skin, but I wasn't used to being targeted so directly and with so much hate. I remember one time, I'm a fan of K-pop as well. So, and a lot of people don't understand that, how someone could be a fan of extreme music and then be a fan of something so like bubbly and pretty and cute.
I get that a lot.
But,
I get that a lot.
Yeah,
like people are like,
I see where
like I see
that could be a thing.
People are like astounded when I talk about how much I love jazz and hip hop, because they're like, but dude, you're wearing like a cattle decapitation shirt. And I'm like, yeah, and?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they're like, oh, okay, so you like Whitechapel and Kiari Palmy, you like, okay, yeah, I do. But I made a video once, in not even in jest, because I don't think it was anything to make fun of. I just genuinely saw a lot of similarities between the work ethic of metal musicians and K-pop musicians in terms of like their onstage professionalism and the lengths they'll go to like make their fans happy. And I reference people who have like gotten electrocuted on stage and like still managed to go on and like perform shows, and like when Dave Grohl like broke his leg and still finished the show. Yeah, Frankie from Amir was electrocuted on stage once.
This is the first I'm hearing about that. I don't even like Amir, and that's kind of badass.
I know, right? So,
damn.
Like, I was just illustrating that, and then there was a similar K-pop artist who also, like, broke their toe and like, doing a dance on stage, and she, like, hobbled off for a second and was back, like, 2 minutes later and finished the whole set. So I was making comparisons between the two, and, like, how incredibly focused and diligent you have to be in these genres of music. And the comments were just livid. They were like, how dare you? K-pop can never reach the levels of metal, and just things attacking my gender, my race, my intellect. I made another video once. This wasn't a metal related one, but this one I was reviewing a Pearl Jam book that I bought, and the comments on that one were just like, you don't even know anything. Like, you probably don't even listen to this. I don't know why people feel like they need to pretend they like a band to blah blah blah. And I'm just like, oh my god, okay. Instead of fighting in the comments, I ended up just making all those videos private, and then I just stopped uploading content related to that altogether. Aside from online bullying, which can be more like serious, straightforward racial aggression, I work in a music rehearsal studio and venue as a general manager in my local city. And I am around music all the time.
Sorry, one moment. I'm sorry about that. Can you repeat yourself?
It's cool. So, yeah, I am a general manager at a music venue located in my local city in D.C., and most of the acts who come through are some subgenre of rock, whether it be like, I've worked with bands that are like all kinds of music, like punk, doom, all that kind of stuff. And unfortunately, I'm one of the only women on staff, and I'm also the only Black woman on staff. So a lot of the things that I get from them are more microaggressions, like implying that I don't know how to do my job, or I don't know anything about music. I remember one time a band came through and they needed a couple of parts to a couple extra symbols and some other stuff for a kit that they were trying to set up. And I listened patiently and tried to understand what it was that they needed so I could get it for them. And in the middle of them trying to like explain what they needed, they were like, "Is there a guy that can help me with this?" Because
whoa,
as if they didn't trust that I could gather the simple materials that they were asking me for. And even though that's not quite a racial microaggression I've experienced, like I mentioned earlier, like this stuff is all intersectional.
Mm-hmm.
I deal with stuff that is race-based, but I also deal with stuff that is a transgression against me as a woman. So it's pretty much everywhere because I'm so deeply involved in music, both as a fan, as someone who plays music, because I play bass, and as someone who works in a music-related space. You kind of can't really escape it. But unfortunately, that's just what my reality is. And the sad part is I love metal so much, and so many people tell me, well, why don't you just like quit? Like, clearly they don't fuck with you. They don't like you. They always have something to say. You're always having these negative experiences. Just forget about it then. But I can't, because I love it so much, and the music speaks to me, and it always has. So it sucks that I feel like I have to deal with it in order to get the happiness or the gratification that I get from listening to and playing metal music.
Not to mention, if you quit, they win. That's kind of the way I've always seen that.
Exactly.
Like, you can't make progress
so
if
true.
you quit. Like, I mean, this is a genre. I mean, again, as a straight white man, there's not much I can add to what I have experienced, but I have seen some very blatant racism and discrimination in my time. I mean, I remember years ago, just before I started college, I went to a concert, and it was Cannibal Corpse and Napalm Death at a small venue here in the city. And I had two friends with me, Tyrone and Tyrell. They were black, and we were just in line, and there was some crotchety-looking redneck dude who had maybe 3 teeth in his head, and he was like, "What are you N-words doing here?" Like,
wow.
right off the bat.
Oh my God.
And, and I remember even 2 years later, a friend of mine, David, he joined me for the Rockstar Mayhem Fest. I believe it was the one that had, like, Slayer, King Diamond, Whitechapel, Thy Art Is Murder, Code Orange.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the same thing, just like, what are you doing here? What you don't listen to hardcore, you don't listen to metal, what is this?
Yeah.
And, again, as a straight white man, I'd never seen that before, and it was really disgusting to me, because metal for me has always been a blank canvas, a blanket that I can just wrap myself in and escape into.
Yeah.
And it was disappointing that people I cared about could not have that same experience that I was having.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it sucks. Okay, I'm ready.
Hello. There's just as many interruptions on both of our ends.
Yeah, I finally just got to work, so but yeah, so yeah, I'm pretty fortunate to like live in a city that's pretty progressive, and I'm sure the experience of a metal fan who is black and like maybe from the Bible Belt or somewhere in the Midwest might be a little different, but even in my situation, in such a diverse area as the DC metropolitan area, like New York, Philly, that kind of stuff, you get the looks, the kind of discomfort, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And then even if people are just kind of ignoring me for the most part, it still just feels so awkward being the only person of color at, like, there's been so many hardcore shows here in my city and, like, small venues where I'm the only black person, or I'm the only person that's also female and black, so, well, that's no fault of the metal communities at all or anything like that, but all of that stuff can kind of stack on and make you so disillusioned with the scene as a whole.
No, absolutely. I mean, I don't think metal is inherently racist. We'll get more into this later, mind you, but yeah. I do think that some people, for the most part, are very inviting, but a lot of other people just aren't. And it's...
Right. Exactly.
I don't even know how else to explain it. They just aren't. And it's unfortunate that in these particular times, people are even still like that. You know, you'd think that in 2020 we're beyond that. But, I mean, even just
exactly.
You look at Bubba Wallace, you look at George Floyd, and how black people are treated on a regular basis regardless of what they listen to. And it's like, that's I can't believe we've come so far and yet we haven't moved at all.
Yeah, it's so funny that you say that because a lot of people, when I try to talk to them about like my experiences with racism in the metal community, I hear, well, the metal community is one of the most welcoming communities I've ever been a part of, and I don't understand how you could have that experience. I've never seen it, and they try to like, well, because I haven't seen it, then I have to question the validity of your claim, which is one of the most frustrating things to have to deal with. The people to deny your experience just because they haven't experienced it themselves, which is like kind of the whole point. Of course, you don't experience this. You're not black, so
yeah.
Of course, you don't see this.
No, absolutely.
But yeah, that happens a lot. So that's why I just kind of stayed away from just like arguing people in the line and stuff. It's just fruitless. They just, no matter how I explain it, it doesn't matter if I'm swearing or if I'm being really gentle about it. They don't see it. So I just don't bother anymore.
How do you respond to members of the Ghost Inside, Memphis Mayfire, Motley Crue using racist, aggressive language? It's a pattern I've seen a lot pop up in the last few months, probably because of what's happening in the streets right now, mind you. But it seems pretty disturbing to me. There's even video of Winds of Plague performing in blackface, which is
wow.
Yeah, there's no excuse for that as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
So how does stuff like that make you feel, that we're still seeing that racist language from these big bands that fill stadiums that, you know, in some cases they're preaching equality? I mean, Ghost Inside has a Black Lives Matter shirt, for God's sakes.
Yeah, exactly. I think the hardest part about constantly seeing that kind of language or negative imagery that, you know, puts your race in a bad light or anything is that I'm past the point where I want to fight it anymore. It's just exhausting. I already have to spend so much of my life fighting in other areas, fighting for people to take my natural hair seriously, or fighting to get the job, or fighting fetishization and that kind of stuff. I don't want to have to deal with the same shit in my music. That's kind of where I go to escape. And the hardest part about hearing that stuff from bands that I like, and or knowing that a song that speaks to me so much is associated with an artist who can speak that way about people of my color, it's just so difficult because I just feel tired at the end of the day. Like, I don't want to even like boycotting things or protesting. It takes so much emotional strength to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're just constantly being beaten down from every other area of your life, whether it's fearing the cops or fear of being discriminated against in the workplace, and then you have to go to the place where you feel the most safe and the most comfortable with your music, only to find that that place isn't safe either, it's easy to just feel just sad and dejected and tired, and you kind of don't know what to do. So it's very easy to just kind of lay down and die in a way. If you looked at my social media now, you might see a retweet here and there about whatever fucked up thing, whatever band dude has done this week. But unfortunately, a lot of my social media, you won't see it anymore because it's so rampant that if I retweeted everything I saw and I voiced every thought that I had, my entire feed would just be a Black Lives Matter thing. And unfortunately, I don't have the energy for that. And my entire identity is not just fighting to live and be seen as a real metal fan or whatever. You know what I mean?
Or even a real person, for that matter.
Fighting all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, especially for people who I feel like aren't listening anyway. So it almost feels pointless to even try and just be like, no, I want you to try and see me for a legit fan like you see all the rest of your fans. And please don't speak badly about my race. Like, I'm just tired of begging for that shit. I'm tired of just... It's just all so exhausting. So even when I do hear this stuff, it's like, it hurts, but it's not surprising. It's completely expected at this point. I have gotten to a point where if I get into a new band, I kind of don't immediately rush to follow them on Instagram or anything like that anymore because I just don't want to be disappointed. And I think that's the reality for a lot of black metal fans. We just know, don't get too involved because they're gonna disappoint you.
Because someone's gonna twist, someone's gonna turn, say something stupid.
Yep, exactly. It's almost inevitable. Like at one point, me and my friends would make a joke out of it to see if we could like pick on whatever artist we could be like, and Google their name with racist next to
and
it,
see how clean their background is.
Yeah, exactly. And it sucks to even have to want to do that about a musical artist that you like. It's just a song, but your identity is so important to you that you feel like a traitor if you don't like acknowledge that they did this stuff. And the last thing I want to do is be one of those people of color who just turn a blind eye and pretend that it doesn't matter, it doesn't affect me, when it completely does.
How would you respond to metalheads, rock listeners that would say that these types of conversations, or politics as they simply put it, don't matter within heavy metal and extreme music? That sigh says it all right there.
Yeah, it's so tiring, and it sucks because I hear it all the time. And it sucks the most when I hear it from like other black people or Latino people or Latinx people. Yeah, I think that I don't know if you are familiar with Jared Alonji's channel.
I can't say that I am, no.
Okay. He did a lot of like parody stuff about like making fun of like metalcore bands and pop punk bands and that kind of stuff. But he did this really good video, like a comedy with like a serious note to it about Tim Lambesis. And his whole drama was like trying to kill his wife and all that.
Oh God, I almost forgot about that. Jesus.
Yeah. That he did a video about that, and one of the things he said in it was just that yeah, like people, they shouldn't be allowed to represent the whole scene. But unfortunately, these people do have a platform.
Mm-hmm.
They do have people who are watching them and following them. And I think what people fail to realize is that when people, I can't speak for everybody else, but I know I can speak for myself. When I see people excusing or condoning the use of harmful language or any kind of negative behavior that happens, that these musicians take part in, and they just are willing to just support it or look the other way, they effectively make themselves an unsafe space for other metal fans, if you know what I mean. So, for example, when the whole Tim Lambesis thing happened, and a lot of people were in the comments talking about how metal it was to try and kill your wife, and all this other like super crazy edgelord shit that they were saying, and like it wasn't that big of a deal. The first thing that popped in my head was, well, now I'm never going to this fucking show because not only is he nuts, all his fans are nuts.
Because the audience is going to sit there and be like, Tim's great, you know, he did what he felt was right or whatever. It's just music.
Exactly. And I would never want to be around anybody who thinks like that. So not only is it just harmful for the artist to do that, when you sit by and make it clear that you don't care about what they're doing, I know that I don't want to be around you either. So it ends up just making me not want to go to shows anymore. And there's so many bands who will come through and I love their music, but I'll be like, well, no, their fans are crazy, so I can't go. And I just will feel so uncomfortable doing it. So.
I mean, I can think of tons and tons of bands that have done objectively horrible shit, said objectively horrible shit, and the fans are just like, yeah, but the music's great, you know?
Right, exactly.
I think Burzum is one of the most famous examples, I think. I mean, Varg Vikernes was a neo-Nazi. He killed people and he encouraged people to kill people, but because he's considered an icon of Norwegian black metal, the fans are just like, oh, whatever, he didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah. Yep. It sucks. And I know that someone's going to be like, oh, what do you want us to do? Just not go to shows and whatever. But no, that's not what I'm saying at all. And this is something that Jared addressed in his video too. And basically, he was just like, withdraw your financial support from these bands, unfortunately. Or, well, not unfortunately. Like, if that's what needs to be done, then that's what needs to be done. Don't go to their shows. Don't stream their music. Don't buy their merch. Whatever it takes. Like, or at the very least, like, reach out to these people and try and talk to them and let them understand, like, hey, like, we're a fan of you. We love what you do, but we can't stand by and let you talk like this about people or say these things or do these things. So get it together, man. I think Andy Glass from We Came as Romans, the bassist, he has handled this Black Lives Matter thing and this like new consciousness thing better than any musician that I follow ever. He's been doing the work, and he posts on Instagram all the time about it, and he posts receipts of all the donations he's made and all the books that he bought to read about this stuff, and he
That's
calls
great.
out other people to do the same thing, and that's what I wish I could see more from other musicians in the scene. I don't know if I will, but him doing it gives me a lot of hope.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy for a musician to say racism is bad, but if they're not actively doing anything to change it, then, you know, that's just a blanket statement. It's just like, okay, what next? It means nothing. And I can only think of a couple other metal musicians as of late who are actively trying to change this scene. Fit for the guys from Fit for an Autopsy are a great example.
Yeah, I heard about that.
They've been donating a lot to various causes as of late. There are a lot of underground bands that have been donating to bail funds as well. Vile Creature, Feminazgul, Smolder. Coincidentally, these are all bands that are fronted by women, some of them gay and transgender, so that could very well be a part of it as well. Minorities standing up for each other. And Rob Flynn from Machine Head, he's been to pretty much every Black Lives Matter in LA from what I understand, and he donates on a nearly daily basis.
Yeah, he's been very vocal about this stuff. I appreciate him.
But, you know, it just still more needs to be done. It can't just be these figures and these bands. There needs to be a lot more vocality, a lot more output, a lot more heart, I guess, is the word I'm looking for.
Yeah.
If I may, I'd like to read off some of the comments that I sent you. Do you still have some time?
Yeah, I do.
Wonderful. So, when I originally emailed you, these were the comments that people sent my way talking about whether or not they felt heavy metal was inherently racist. This first one is from Hector Jamirez. Do you want me to read these out, or?
Yeah, please.
Okay. This first one's from Hector Jamirez. He says, no, if the racial slurs were malicious, but the person in question tried to improve his or her character and genuinely feel sorry for what they said, all is forgiven, at least for me. If what was said was meant to be a joke, no harm done either. I just think that we all do stupid things in our younger days and mean nothing by it. How do you feel about something like that? Do you think he's onto something, or?
Okay. Well, first of all, I know some of these are very, very long, so if you don't want to read them, you don't have to. I have the email up.
Oh, wonderful.
Also.
Okay, that's all good then.
Because when I told you to read them, I was like, wait a minute, some of these are really long, so maybe not. But yeah, okay, so. Okay. I think that there's some truth to what Hector said. I can even speak for myself. When I was not born, I did not grow up in a household that really taught me how to undo all the inherently racist, sexist things that we are taught all the time. In all the ways that the hatred of minorities and women and that kind of stuff is wormed into everything that we do in our society, in our media, that kind of stuff. So I had to unlearn all that crap. And I didn't even begin that process till I was like 21 or 22. So I completely agree that sometimes people do stuff when they're young. And sometimes it's not even when they're young. Sometimes they don't get these conversations and they're not called out on this crap until they're much older. But I think the key becomes when you are, it is your responsibility to take that information and really do the self-work that it takes to try and correct some of those biases. I think that one of the things my parents had always taught me was that when someone has criticism for you, it's important to take your ego out of it for a second and try and consider if there might be any truth to it. Seldom will people just attack you and completely pull something out of their ass that's totally not true. There usually might be some truth to it. Mm-hmm. And that's something that I've taken from my personal life, and I wish a lot of people would take when it comes to these conversations about calling out our problematic behavior when it comes to race and that kind of thing. So I think there is some truth to that. Sometimes people just really, really don't know. My boss is like a 40-year-old white man, and this whole quarantine, Black Lives Matter protest rioting thing has been really the first time anyone has ever like confronted him about the ways in which he's complicit in everything that goes on. I mean, of course, he quote unquote has black friends and that kind of stuff, and he hires black people and all that stuff. But this is the first time that he's really been forced to examine how maybe by him not being willing to speak up, or him having this space that he created and employed me at, and allow people to speak to his black female employee in a way that is not too nice. Because I have brought this stuff to his attention. He was just like, well, I'm sorry you dealt with that. And then didn't put any kind of like policy in place to protect me as his employee or anyone else in the space who may have been around it or heard it or may have been a victim of that. And he now realizes that it is his responsibility to do just that and try and fix those things. So I encourage everyone to, once you realize that this is an issue for you, and you know that maybe there's some self-examination needs to be done, please do the work. I know it's hard and it's extremely uncomfortable, and no one likes to sit in with the idea that they might be harmful to someone else, or that they might be racist, or they might have any kind of prejudices. But once you do, and you acknowledge it, and you start working toward it, you just become a truly safe space and just a better person for everybody around you. Even though it's difficult, I think personally that the work is so rewarding, and I genuinely do feel like a better person when I take the time to examine myself and really make the effort to try and correct those things. So yes, people suck, when they're young, when they're kids, fine, but do the work. Please take responsibility for your own education, so that you can make the metal community or the world at large or whatever better for everybody.
I don't have much to add on to that. I think that's very well said. I agree. I will add on to this, though, to Hector. This line here kind of bothers me a little. If what was said was meant to be a joke, then find no harm done. I can't really think of I can't think of a scenario where aggressive, racist language can be passed off as a joke. Like, I was in a comedy metal band in college, and we were an edgy band. We were called Walking Socks Monster, and we sang some really edgy, stupid shit. Stuff that, in retrospect, I'm not super proud of. But the one thing that was never in any of our music, there was never any kind of, like, racist, aggressive language, because we knew that regardless of what those words meant, they just weren't inherently funny. So I challenge Hector to provide me an example where aggressive racist language could somehow be a joke and no harm done would be, well, done. But other than that, I fully agree with everything you have said.
Yeah, I agree. The jokes thing, it's the same. I feel the same way about people who make like rape jokes or jokes about disabled people. I just don't understand how you could ever find anything like that funny. I don't understand how years of oppression rooted in a word or a flag or whatever could ever be humorous.
Mm-hmm.
Hector, I implore you, please reconsider that, because at least on my end, maybe it's not funny because maybe you might not have been the target of such language, but I can say for certain, for myself and for a lot of my other fellow minority people, it is not funny. So
I'd like to move on to this comment from Ether Eater. Do you have that?
Yes, I do.
How would you respond to Ether Eater? There's a pretty lengthy section about the history of rock and roll itself, for that matter. How do you feel about what Ether has said?
Okay. I love the article that this person mentioned that alludes to the ethnic cleansing of disco by rock fans, because honestly, I still think that somewhat happens today. Although recently, I have seen a lot more like rock or alternative and metal fans leaning more into rap and hip hop, but just as many rap and rock fans I see completely loathe and despise rap. And
I gotta be honest, there was a time when that was me.
Yeah,
up until maybe 2015.
I was me too.
Mm-hmm.
There is something about just and I get it, right? Because a lot of the metal and stuff that we like and listen to is extremely technical, and the skill and the prowess that it takes to be these musicians really is fascinating and absolutely incredible. And in a way, it does feel like it's like better in a way. The instrumentation is just so fascinating and it's fun to watch and listen to. Like I could listen to like crazy shit like Animals as Leaders or any kind of that super technical guitar stuff. I love all that. And it's very easy to feel a sense of superiority when people have that kind of like skill or talent. But I had to unlearn all that shit too, and that's a whole other conversation about the personal, the way the metal community can kind of like almost cause you to form biases against your own community until you take that into your own hands and unlearn all that shit. But I realized that a lot of metal fans really do hate rap and hip hop music. I see in comments all the time. I saw it in the way that those people bash me when I tried to compare like metal and K-pop, and I agree. There are so many who still vehemently despise rap under the guise that it's not as intelligent, the lyric subject matter is too vapid or it's too violent to be good music, but they'll still praise like bands like Led Zeppelin for paving the way,
and
all these bands that are like have super violent, crazy lyrics and shit.
Mm-hmm. Like there are tons of bands that are extremely abhorrently violent. The aforementioned Cannibal Corpse into Cattle Decapitation, Pig Destroyer, Dying Fetus. There's a band called Dying Fetus, for God's sakes.
Right.
And that's just the beginning of it all. I mean, you can't say, oh, it's because hip hop's violent, and then be like, yeah, time to go listen to like Carcass.
Right.
Time to go listen to the time to go listen to
right.
Exhumed. Time to go listen to a song about someone hacking another human being with a machete.
Literally. About, what was that fucking Whitechapel song that was like described disemboweling his girlfriend or some shit? Like, it's that kind of stuff that makes me question, like, is it really the lyrical content that bothers you, or is it the image of hip-hop that bothers you? Is it the people performing it that bothers you? I think there's something to be said about all of that. So yeah, I really do feel like that if an opportunity for an ethnic cleansing of music could happen, I feel like unfortunately a lot of metal fans would be all for it, and it sucks because there are tons of black musicians and rock and metal and that kind of stuff. And one thing I always tell people that they like to fight me on is that the metal community likes to pretend it doesn't care about like image and that kind of stuff, but it does.
That's the biggest lie in the world. Metalheads get upset because Metallica shirts are sold at H&M or something. Like that's such a lie. You absolutely care about image. They care so much about image that when you say the name of a genre, there's already an image in your mind of what those musicians are supposed to look like.
Right.
When I say glam metal, people immediately get this image of like big blonde hair and zebra pants, and the singers don't have shirts, and if they do, they're like all oiled and ripped.
Yeah, exactly. So that image does matter to metal fans. So people like to say that they don't see color and that kind of stuff. But I think everyone does. And it may not be you may not consciously say, I don't like this because this is how this looks, but image plays a big role. And sorry, could you hold on for just a second? I will restart that statement when I come back, but somebody's at the door and I need to let them in.
Oh, no, by all means.
Okay, I'm back.
Hello.
Hey, so, I love what Hector also said about, hold on for a second, let me look at his comment again. These comments are always my favorite because they give me hope that not everybody feels the way of so many other people on the internet do.
Yeah, I mean,
that they all aren't so willing to pass it off as a joke or just brush it away.
I was actually very impressed for the most part by the comments that my followers made. It seems like everyone seems to agree that heavy metal on some level has an issue with racism, which I think is, I hate to say it, but it's weirdly refreshing.
Yeah, exactly. It is for me because even one little comment that alludes to anyone kind of even being on my side, it really does give me hope. And like, okay, every so often I will like, something will happen and I'll like retweet it or post it and be like, okay, I'm back. Fuck. Like, the community pulled me back in again. I'm here. I'm ready. I'm ready to be like a hardcore stan of all these bands and all this music again, because there is a lot of good people in the metal community, and I know that everybody knows that. It can be one of the most welcoming communities. Absolutely. I have met people who are in that community who are just the greatest people ever, just like I've met people who are super shitty. And I know those kind of people exist everywhere. But when I find the people in the metal community specifically who are especially supportive, or who are willing to acknowledge the challenges that the metal community has with people with race, I'm very excited about it. But as I was saying about image, I see a lot of people use the I don't see color thing, but I don't believe that's true, and I've never believed that's true, because even if you think you don't see color and if you don't treat anyone different, if you know anything about racism and structural racism, you know you feed into that system regardless, unless you are actively trying to go against it, which most people don't know how to do, or even know to do, or realize that we're all part of this one big system, and we're all playing our part in upholding these racialized policies and structures and things of that sort. So I also liked what he mentioned, that about bands being allowed to fester in the community, and that's what I mentioned earlier about fans being a safe space for other fans. Because, like I mentioned earlier, if I know that people are, or I would be crazy to want to go to one of these black metal band shows and stuff. You know what I mean? Like, mm-hmm. I've seen what their music is. I've seen what their fans can be like. I would never want to be a part of that. I would never want to go to one of their shows. I feel like I would legit be at risk if I did. So, and unfortunately, bands do allow this kind of stuff to fester. They're not willing to call out their friends, or they're not willing to call out musicians, and they're all so quick to jump to the defense of these problematic musicians and stuff. So, sorry, give me just a second. The more people are here.
No worries.
Okay, sorry about that.
That is A-okay. That's all good.
Okay. All right. So, when people turn a blind eye to the things these musicians say, or the things that other fans do, it makes me feel like I'm not safe anywhere, because not only are there people who will directly try and antagonize me or harm me, but then I have people who will stand by and let it happen too. So, to some people that might seem extreme, but unfortunately in this world, as in my skin and in my experience, you can't be too safe. So I would rather just kind of just shy away from all of it, really, because that is how I know I'll be the safest. And it sucks that I even have to feel that way in a community that really prides itself on being a place for people to like be themselves, all of themselves, including the race parts. But unfortunately, that's not always my experience. So it's good to know that someone else like Hector understands that, how impactful that is to people, how people even being complacent can even be harmful to other fans.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree with everything Ether says as well. I think too often people are silent, people are complicit. And to expand on Ether's point, it's worth noting that rock and roll, and for that matter all popular music, is appropriated from black music, from gospel, from the blues, from even Negro spirituals dating back to the late 1800s, early 1900s. It's impossible to remove the influence that black people have had on rock and roll music. So to allow such inherently racist, violent behavior and language, even if you don't agree with it, just to allow it, just to turn a blind eye to it, I think it's just as disgusting. You are the bystander, essentially.
Right.
You know, you're not the bully, but you're the bystander.
Yep, exactly.
I'd like to move on to this comment from Luka Sazdanovic, if you have that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think after that, I'll ask you about one more person because it sounds like you're very busy, and frankly, I may need to get going as well.
Got you. Okay.
So, but first, Luka. First, Luka.
Okay. Let me read that comment real quick. From my
No
experience,
problem.
I've seen multiple situations that prove racist. Um, yeah, I think that Luka got it right. There is a problem with racism in heavy metal, and it might not be inherently because of music. Like you said, racist people exist in every genre. I know so many hip hop fans who will live their life like it's a Lil Yachty song and still hate black people or do things that are like, that's just how it is. You know what I mean? Like, they'll emulate black style, black mannerisms, and black jargon all day, and then still have the most disgusting things to say about black people, or think that racialized humor on TikTok is funny and that kind of shit.
Mm-hmm.
I do caution people, though, against this kind of like flippant response to questions like the one you pose. Yes, it's not inherently because of music. People do just suck. But and not to say that Luka is doing this, but I always make sure that people don't stop at just people suck no matter what, because it kind of has this tone of like, oh well,
yeah, we're just gonna
doesn't matter
deal
where
with
you
it.
go. Yeah, like, we're fucked no matter what we do, and that might be true, but that is not the way I want to go through life. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to just resign to the idea that I'm not safe anywhere, or that I'm going to face racism wherever I go. As true as that might be, I always try to stay positive, and I try to stay optimistic that there are some people out there who are willing to stand up to this and who can be tireless in their fight against that kind of language and behavior in any community, especially the metal community. But yeah, it's also still good to know that people have seen these situations and know that that they're harmful and that they do exist, and that we're not just making this shit up. So yeah, I just like to always remind people that racists do exist and they are everywhere, and that we shouldn't stop trying to call it out in our own backyard.
It's interesting that you bring up hip hop earlier, because hip hop in many ways has been appropriated by white people as well. I mean, that's how we end up with the Limp Bizkits and the Eminems and the Kid Rocks, and you know, it's there's this fascinating pattern of white people taking something cultural music and taking it from black people and trying to make it different so it can appeal to white people, and then saying, well, the black people, they got it wrong. Or maybe not actively saying it, but still those microaggressions and those subconscious thoughts of black people are this. They are happy to take from culture and then still smack it.
Right, exactly.
And even more interestingly, Luka brings up black metal, a genre that we just discussed. I totally see where Luka's coming from, because I would not agree that all black metal is racist, but the genre itself is inherently based in racism. I mean, all the founders of this genre, that for God's sakes, they had a cult called the Black Circle, where they literally encouraged each other to kill people and to do horrible things. They burned churches, and it's a genre that is inherently rooted in hatred. It may not represent that hatred today, specifically if we're looking at bands like Death Heaven and Mirkor, more modern acts, more progressive acts. But those old school bands, definitely. That's like definitely.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm going to direct you now to a few more comments from Dane Kaiser. And I think after that, we'll wrap up, because I've got to get going, and I don't want you to get in trouble at your job wherever you are. So.
Yeah, thank you. This one is especially saddening to me because I feel really disappointed when people aren't willing to like deplatform people for being harmful. I think I'm trying to maybe understand it from their perspective of why they would be so resistant to it. Maybe because they're thinking about themselves, and maybe if they were in that situation and they made a racially insensitive comment, that they wouldn't want to be deplatformed in that way, or have massive groups of people just totally and suddenly withdraw their support. Yes, that would suck. However, you did call somebody the N-word, so, or whatever else the transgression may have been. And unfortunately, I do think that taking people's platform is honestly the least we could do. Maybe sometimes that's what it takes for people to wake up and realize that they can't talk this way, or that they can't target their own fans like that. Because the people that they're calling out and talking about, like, there are people in your audience who you're talking to who look just like that, or you're calling out people, maybe not directly, but by your language or behavior, of people who ride so hard for you. That is the most shitty part about all of this, is that when I hear these words and these terms, and unfortunately, thank God, I've never been in a show where I have it right in front of me, because I don't know what I would do. I think I'd have a whole meltdown, because that'd be so sad. Mm-hmm. But it's like, damn, I liked you. Fuck. Like, why did you have to go and do this? Like, I'm a fan of yours. I'm just here spending my money, supporting you, minding my business. You didn't have to go and say that. So, I know that he doesn't think people deserve to lose their platform, but I completely disagree. I think they should.
I would agree. You know, people screw up, as we've mentioned before. People can change. People do dumb stuff when they're young, but there does come a point where it's like, how many second chances can you give someone?
Exactly. Yeah.
Like, I think Ted Nugent's an incredible example. This is a guy who's considered to be a rock and roll icon, and he consistently says horrible, horrible things about black people, about gay people, about people of color, and frankly about anyone who would dare disagree with him on the most basic issues.
Yeah.
I mean, yep, I think it was like early 90s, he said that, like, people who play hip-hop, they're like suburban monkeys and all they do is shoot people.
Wow.
Yeah, something to that effect. And if you type him up now, he's saying all kinds of stuff like, yeah, Donald Trump should throw all the Mexicans in jail. And he said something in 2012 where it was like, if Barack Obama's elected president, I'm just going to shoot him. End of story. Like, when it gets to that point, time to go.
No, yeah. Who else? There was someone else I was thinking of that the name is blanking on right now, that people continue to support, even though they have time and time again failed us in their language or their behavior. I can't remember who it was right now, but
a YouTuber?
Ted Nugent is a really good example. Huh?
A YouTuber?
No, a musician.
Oh, sorry. I was about to say, I can think of a couple of YouTubers as well.
Oof. Yeah, no, it's so funny you say that, because throughout this whole Black Lives Matter thing, my whole feed has been like, the people I do follow, they're like music YouTubers or the actual musicians. They, a lot of people have been stepping the fuck up, and I really appreciate it. They've been like making the posts and showing proof of their donations, and it's so funny that some of the YouTubers that I like and follow, who like metal YouTubers, have not been quite as vocal about the same thing. I was on, whose page was it? Well, I won't say their name, but they're very, very, very big, like over 1 million subscribers.
Okay.
And their whole channel is built on, like, you know, metal videos or like critiques or ranking albums or parody videos and that kind of stuff. And they've just been mum about the whole thing. And they have so much reach and pull with the metal community, especially and I'm not even going to say especially young people, like all ages, really, because these people have all guys and girls of all ages watching their content. And I wanted to see them post something so bad, especially because one of them is always like really somewhat vocal, more than his.
Yeah, sorry, continue.
Yeah, this YouTube duo, one of them is always way more like vocal about making sure he uses make sure he stays away from coded language, and making sure he uses like proper pronouns for people and stuff. And but even he didn't call out anything related to this stuff. And one of my friends who's also a YouTuber, she's a YouTuber on like the K-pop side, was like, yeah, a lot of these influencers, they're their capitalistic goals are more important to them than showing any kind of like decency when it comes to like race and that kind of stuff. So and unfortunately, and I get it, you know, everybody's trying to make their point and stay afloat and that kind of stuff, and you don't want to lose your following. But it just sucks that sometimes people will choose that, and these are people not even like real celebrities and stuff. Like, cool, they have some sick endorsements or whatever, but they're unwilling to use their platform to talk about this stuff. So, do I think people should lose their entire platform by choosing not to speak out? Not necessarily.
But I would encourage them to speak up.
Exactly, I would still encourage them to speak up. I know how burdensome it can feel to try to use a space that you created that's like fun and happy and really lighthearted, and then use it to talk about something as heavy as race and that kind of stuff. But I still challenge, especially my white male friends. I always tell them that they are my biggest allies in this fight, in these conversations, because people listen to you guys, and you guys
Absolutely
are the tastemakers when it comes to the shit that goes down in this community. You guys decide what bands are cool. You decide that this person's a poser. You decide this and all that stuff, and people listen to you.
I think it falls upon white people, but specifically straight white neurotypical men, to say this is wrong.
Yeah.
Because I white privilege is real, but we can use it to do some good. We can use it to shift the balance if we're smart about it.
Exactly. So, I like you said earlier, people do make mistakes, and people have to learn to not be racist and to not be prejudiced and that kind of stuff, because it's inherent in a lot of us. But once you've been called out, and once people have challenged you to do better, and then you continue to not do better, then of course, I can't advocate that you keep your platform, even if your music doesn't reflect any bigoted viewpoints, quote unquote, like you said. That doesn't matter to me. That's not what I'm thinking about when I'm seeing you on stage, and I'm seeing your Instagram posts, and you're jetting here and getting to live this like privileged life of like traveling and playing the music that you made, and however good it is. I just feel so bitter when I see people thriving, even being so harmful and basically telling their fans, some of you matter and some of you don't. Even though our youth is all the same.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy to feel like they don't care and that you don't matter. And that's not me. I know somebody's going to be, why do you want to matter to these people? Because I put my effort and my support behind these people, and I want to be. I'm not asking to be rewarded. At the very least, I'm asking to not be targeted by this shitty talk and with all this Confederate flag imagery or whatever fist you have in the air today. Like, that is the least you can do. I'm not asking you to coddle me or cater to me. I'm not asking for my representation in your music videos. The least you can do is not be an asshole and say all this mean shit about people of my race or color or gender on social media.
Well, I think that's actually a pretty good place to end this. I think I've got nothing else to say, really. That's incredibly well said.
Okay, cool.
Thank you very much. Any final messages out there for metalheads listening that are maybe still a little bit unconvinced?
Yeah. I don't know if you're in astrology or anybody else is in astrology, but sorry, hold on for a second. I'll restart that with that. Okay. This might be fruitless, but I'm going to try to appeal to the heartstrings instead, and just say that all I think that Black metal fans want is, at the very least, to be left alone. As sad as it might sound, I don't think that I will live to see a point where I am celebrated on the same level or in the same way that white fans are. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with just my own little black existence, being a metal fan, chilling at shows and listening to music in peace. But all I really want is to not have to turn on whatever YouTube video or log into my Twitter account and see that some guy in a band has decided to say some mean shit again, or decided that they think it's funny or cool to say the N-word or whatever other racialized shit that they do. I also would prefer it, or would like it, if metal fans felt more comfortable calling out these people and owning their power as fans to really step to these musicians and say, like, this isn't cool. You know, like, if I'm going to back you, this has to be a two-way street. If I'm going to back you financially by buying your records and your merch and going to your shows and sharing your music and streaming all this shit, the least you can do is not disrespect your fans, which
Absolutely.
is essentially what that behavior is doing.
And that
I'm
goes,
not asking you.
That goes back to even way back at the beginning of this video when we talked about Lorna Shore. I straight up said I don't feel comfortable talking about this record. I don't feel comfortable patronizing Lorna Shore right now because of CJ McCreery. Sometimes those little actions make a big difference.
It really, really does. Especially for me, as a fan who sometimes is a part of the group that whatever musician of the week is targeting with their language or with their behavior. Maybe you as in like white males or whatever other privileged group that doesn't have to deal with the shit. Maybe you don't know what this is like. I would never wish anyone should know what this is like, because it is harmful and it does suck. But as someone who experiences it and has experienced it on more than one occasion, I can tell you that it's not fun. It's very hurtful. I'm a sensitive little Cancer over here, so I need you to be nice to me. And that doesn't mean kissing my ass or anything. It just means like just not saying
common courtesy, human respect.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. That's all I want.
And it doesn't, I think too, people are like, oh, well, that's political, but like this is bigger than left versus right. This is bigger than Democrat versus Republican. This is human rights.
Right.
Exactly. It's really that simple. I don't think it should be a political issue to say, hey, treat me like a human being.
Yep. Mic drop, period.
Yeah. On that note, I think we're okay then. Thank you very much for your time. A lot of interruptions on both our ends, but we made it through.
Thank you so much. You're so patient and so nice.
Well, thank you. You're at work and you're doing this. My God, I'm just a lazy asshole sitting in his basement. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Do you have a Patreon?
Oh, I do not, because I don't know. I've just never really thought of doing it. Why should I get one?
Okay. I think so, because I can think of a lot of people that would like to support people like this. I mean, I'm not saying that people should necessarily be rewarded for being a decent human being, but I like to acknowledge effort.
I wouldn't object, mind
effort,
you.
You know what I mean? So, huh?
I wouldn't object. I'm a fan of money.
Okay, then yeah, I think you should, or like put a PayPal link or something somewhere, or anything. At least I know I can speak for myself, and I can speak for a lot of my friends who crave YouTubers who are white and male and who are willing to talk about this stuff and who will share your shit and will donate to your shit and all that stuff. So if you consider it, I think it would be awesome if you could do that.
But I think maybe I will do that. Maybe
okay,
I will.
Awesome.
Thank you. That's very flattering of you to say.
Of course, not a problem.
And that's all. Thank you very much for your time. And to everyone at home, you have yourself a fantastic day.
All right, thank you.